Now, another law of human nature is that we humans have what I call a self-opinion, an opinion about ourselves. And people who've done studies have shown that that opinion is generally more elevated than the reality. So we tend to think of ourselves as intelligent, at least in our field we're intelligent. We like to think of ourselves as autonomous. We just make our own decisions, like people don't tell us what to do. I'm an independent person. And we tell ourselves that we're basically good, moral people, that we're nice and polite, that we're team players, that we get along with other people. But an equal law of human nature is that this sunny, kind of positive portrait is actually covering up and masking a dark side, what the psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow, and that every human being has a dark side, has a shadow. And this shadow is not something that's wired into our brains. It comes about how we are raised as children. Basically, as children, we come into this world as a kind of complete natural being. We have all kinds of emotions and feelings. We are mischievous. We can love our parents one moment and then hate them the next. We can be that sweet little angel one moment, and the next moment we're burning with desires for revenge, and we steal something from our brother or sister. We were a complete being. We had a full range of emotions. But slowly over time, we have to sort of soften all of that. Our parents are all stressed out, and they're trying to get us to not act out so much. They want us to be more angelic, and teachers have this pressure as well. So slowly, we feel this pressure to kind of tamp down and disguise these sort of natural emotions that are inside all of us. And this energy that was both, could be positive and negative, could be loving and mischievous or vengeful at the same time. All of that, the dark stuff, goes into what is called the shadow. It doesn't disappear. It stays with us as adults. And this shadow that you carry with you, you're feeling tremendous amount of pressure to keep it, conceal it, because you want to present to everybody here at Google an image of yourself as this sweet, angelic child, this person that's wonderful. And it's pressure. How do I keep this dark side from coming out? Well, it comes out in certain moments, particularly when we're feeling stress, when we're feeling moments when we're not getting enough attention and recognition from other people. And it leaks out in some bitchy comment that we give or some abrasive comment that hurts people's feelings. Or it comes out in some act that surprises us or surprises the people around us. And we often see that with celebrities, people in the news who get caught out doing some kind of weird sexual escapade or something like that. I don't know who that person was. That isn't me. Something came over me, right? The guy who invested all his money in Bitcoin, he would tell me, I don't know who that was. That wasn't me that plopped all that money down. Something came over me. And we generally accept these explanations because it makes sense, because it only maybe happens once or twice. But I'm telling you in my book that this kind of behavior is not an exception. It's actually more of the real self that people have, that is leaking out, the shadow side. The shadow likes to disguise itself from you. And one of the great shadow of disguises that I talk about in the book is over-idealization. And this is what we see with the social justice warrior. Now, if you're a social justice warrior, you believe so deeply, you've identified so deeply with your cause, that it justifies any kind of manipulative, nasty, intolerant, bigoted behavior, because it's all for the great cause that I'm promoting, right? You can censor people, you can tell people to shut up, you can do whatever you want, because it's all for your great cause. And you think it's because it's for the cause, but actually a lot of it's coming because the shadow is trying to find some way to get itself out, and it uses you in this fashion. The social media has become this intense magnet for the dark shadow side lurking inside of us, which is why we find all the nihilistic trolls, etc., on social media. It's become an infested ground for the shadow. So the point I try to make, the solution here, is to be aware of it. You're going around and you've so identified with the sweet, angelic persona that you have created for yourself and that you show the world, that you don't even imagine that you have the shadow. And it operates by the fact that you're unaware of it. The fact that Isaac Newton wasn't aware that he had a greedy little person inside of him that was dying to get out made it so that he could lose all of his money in this investment. So you want to see the shadow inside yourself. Recognize that child within you that was tamped down. See the patterns of behavior in which it leaks out. And then in my book, I describe many ways for how you can incorporate your shadow in a productive way. You can take your ambition and aggressive energy and channel it into some great cause. You can be a social warrior. There's a social justice warrior. There's nothing wrong with it. But you don't have to be nasty and intolerant and bigoted. You could be about getting results, about actually promoting your cause instead of hurting and putting down other people, on and on. But the key is you have to first see the shadow within you. In my talks and in my experience, there's always been a phenomenon that has struck me. And it first struck me about 12 years ago when I gave a talk at Microsoft up in the Seattle area. Here was a group of 20, 30,000 people, some in this one area. And I was struck by how similar everybody was. People kind of dressed alike. They all kind of acted alike. They all had sort of this sort of buttoned-down, serious kind of personality. They weren't all the same, but there was something weird about the kind of behavior patterns that I had never seen in any other office before. Then some 7 years ago, I was at Google up in Mountain View, and I noticed a similar thing, but much different. It was a much more playful and open and much more pleasant, to be honest with you, environment. But there was definitely kind of a spirit that group had, so I'm talking about in Mountain View. I worked on the board of directors for a company called American Apparel, and the CEO was this kind of insane madman, kind of like, he had sort of this hippie, free love type of mentality. And here you had a company of 10,000 people, and they were all having nose rings and tattoos and cross-dressing in the office, excuse me. It was like, thank you. It was like, what was going on here? And so I thought, what I'm seeing here at Microsoft, at Google, and American Apparel, that there's a culture. These places have a culture. That's a weird phenomenon if you think about it. France obviously has a culture, but that culture took 1,000 years to evolve, and it's very pronounced. But in the course of 10, 20 years, Microsoft, Google, American Apparel, they've evolved their own culture, their own way of being, where people are kind of similar. What is this phenomenon? And basically, I explain it in my book as one of those very ancient processes that's kind of determining who we are. See, our ancestors, in order to succeed and thrive as a social animal, they developed complex emotions like joy, like surprise, like anxiety. And these emotions would show up on the face. This was before the invention of language. So you could look at the person next to you and see that they were feeling anxious, and then you could feel it as well. And then together you could respond quickly without ever having to say a word, that maybe there was some predator in the area. So these emotional responses that people had were very much communicated without words, viscerally, infected. We became infected. We were susceptible to the emotions of people around us. And we humans have inherited that incredible power. The other thing that happened is that we developed what's known as mirror neuron. I don't know if you're familiar with mirror neurons. Basically, that means is if you're watching somebody playing tennis, the person playing tennis, as they're hitting the ball, certain neurons are firing in their brain to make them hit it. As you're watching them, the same neurons are firing in your brain that are firing in theirs, so that this is what gives us the power to imitate and to learn. So you'll notice sometimes you'll be watching a basketball game, and you'll almost like be shooting a free throw along with the player because you're trying to will that ball into the net. Those are your mirror neurons that are operating. So we have this built-in power to take on the emotions and feelings and moods of the people around us. And if you put enough people together for enough time, through sheer osmosis, you will create some kind of culture, and people will start acting and behaving in a similar way. These cultures can be tight, like in Microsoft, or looser, as I imagine here at Google. They could be more kind of traditional, or they can be more kind of populist. They can be sort of top-down or more egalitarian, on and on and on. Often the culture of a group reflects the person on top. So, Bill Gates, obviously, for Microsoft, and Dov Charney for American Apparel. I don't know. I can't begin to speculate where that might be from Google. I have no idea. So what happens with this culture is that also certain unwritten codes of behavior are evolved. And these sort of determine what is acceptable or not acceptable within this culture. And if you don't pay attention to these codes here at Google or wherever office you're working, you are likely to be fired or ostracized and never really understand why. So you need to pay attention to this. So the idea that I'm trying to promote in this chapter is you like to think of yourself as this independent person where your thoughts and beliefs are your own. But in fact, so many of the things that you think, so many of your values and ideas come from the group.